Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. And I'm glad to see you once again with lecture 23 of modern drama, that is drama 2. In our previous talk, we started with, we moved on with Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, where we discussed the plot of the drama and we started exploring the themes of the drama as well. However, we could only finish one theme, discussion based on one theme, that was language and communication. Today we will try to explore a few other themes, which will include theme of transformation, theme of identity, theme of appearance, and theme of manipulation. Let's see how many of them we can cover today. All right. For this drama, I try to capture different dramatic references and give them according to the themes to you, so you can understand whenever you are talking about one point, how to substantiate your point by taking a reference from the text. So you can do it accordingly. We understand the cycle of themes that we discussed in the previous lecture as well. However, just to refresh your memory, we are done with language and communication, and today we are doing with transformation, theme of transformation. Now this one seemed like a no-brainer. Pygmalion's all about turning a poor girl into a duchess, into a lady. Eliza's metamorphosis is stunning. Her reformed form is stunning. However, you can see that you could even go so far as to call it a Cinderella story. But remember that Cinderella turned back into a poor girl before she finally found her prince. And paying attention to this very fact, you will notice that not all the attempts at transformation here are successful like Cinderella's story. There are plenty of false starts and false endings. By play's end, Shaw's made one thing very clear: be careful what you wish for. So that can be taken one of the bottom lines along with many others: be careful what you wish for. So now let us see if we can divide this theme of transformation into different subcategories, so to understand it in a better way. And when we divide it into subcategories, we have several of them as status divide, perceptions, environmental suitability, overambitiousness, fear of unknown, control of emotion, control of manner, subjectivity, nature, and confidence. Now, what is the role of divide in this transformation and status? Moving up in a society can require a complete transformation. Money, it seems, can't buy everything, however. And the dramatic reference for this is when the note taker says, "Oh yes, quite a fat one. This is an age of upstarts. Men begin in Kentish Town with 80 pounds a year and end in Park Lane with 100,000. They want to drop Kentish Town, but they give themselves away every time they open their mouths. Now I can teach them." All right. So, as far as perception is concerned, what seems like an honest attempt at looking respectable to Eliza seems merely pitiful to Pickering. And Pickering finds it quite a childish wish of Eliza, who is associating looking respectable with the appearance, with the respect of society. And he finds it quite a childish perception. Not all transformations are successful, and sometimes the failure to change can be more affecting than success, and that is what has happened in Eliza's case. And we can see that the flower girl enters in state. She has a hat with 3 ostrich feathers, orange, sky blue and red. She has a nearly clean apron and the shoddy coat has been tided a little. The pathos of this deplorable figure with its innocent vanity and consequential air touches Pickering, who has already straightened himself in the presence of Mrs. Pierce. Well, you can see how Pickering is consoling with this idea of Eliza, where she is associating, where she is projecting her perception of association between looks, appearance and social respect. And that is what became the reason of her transformation. However, how far she could able to transform herself, that is a question, because in the end, this is what she's ready to give away. She's ready to give away her clothes and her jewelry so easily and happily to Higgins, only if she could find some respect otherwise. Now, given the right circumstances, even the most superficial adjustment can lead to a profound and surprising change. And for that, Doolittle says, he hurries to the door, anxious to get away with his booty. When he opens it, he is confronted with a dainty and exquisitely clean young Japanese lady in a simple blue cotton kimono printed cunningly with small white jasmine blossoms. Mrs. Pierce is with her. He gets out of her way deferentially and apologizes. Beg pardon, miss. The Japanese lady's gone. Don't you know your own daughter? So, some very small, most superficial adjustments can lead to a profound and surprising change and transformation, no matter if it is on the surface level only. Well, Pickering and Higgins, caught up in the process of inventing new Elizas, seem to have forgotten that she is a human being. Pickering, we're always talking Eliza. Higgins, teaching Eliza. Pickering, dressing Eliza. Mrs. Higgins, what? Higgins, inventing new Elizas. So they are treating Eliza just rather merely an object of experiment. Fear of unknown. In transformation, when you are going to change into someone new, this fear of unknown is always there. Having achieved her goal and won the bet, Eliza finds that her metamorphosis has left her confused. Having just become something new, she's already afraid of what will come next. No matter how attractive her new self is, unless it is complete, it is a concern for Eliza and everyone who would love her. Lisa, pulling herself together in desperation, and she's desperate. What am I fit for? What have you left me fit for? Where am I to go? What am I to do? What's to become of me? So these all are questions that are rising in Liza's mind, telling her to be afraid of her unknown future. Now, to what extent she is able to control her emotion during her transformation? Higgins, so used to being in control, is disappointed and frustrated to find himself losing hold of his emotion. He, the transformer, has become the transformed, if only momentarily. So we find at point he loses control of his emotion, or probably his emotions take over his control. And we find Higgins, with dignity in his finest professional style. You have caused me to lose my temper. I think that has hardly ever happened to me before. I prefer to say nothing more tonight. I am going to bed. And the control of manner. Here once again Higgins is stunned to find that his creation is now able to control and change her manner with ease. That said, Shaw's use of the word exhibition casts the truth of that change in doubt. Eliza enters, sunny, self-possessed and giving up staggeringly convincing exhibition of ease of manner. She carries a little work basket and is very much at home. Pickering is too much taken aback to rise. Eliza, how do you do, Professor Higgins? Are you quite well? Higgins choking, am I? He can say no more. Now, the matter of subjectivity. Ironically, Eliza argues that the man who taught her to be a lady will never see her to treat her as one. She also suggests that transformation is subjective, that not all people will acknowledge all changes. And why would she say that? Eliza, you see, really and truly, apart from the things anyone can pick up, the dressing and the proper way of speaking, and so on, the difference between a lady and a flower girl is not how she behaves, but how she's treated. I shall always be a flower girl to Professor Higgins, because he always treats me as a flower girl, and always will. But I know I can be a lady to you, because you always treat me as a lady, and always will. And here Eliza is talking to, guess whom? Colonel Pickering. In claiming that he can't change his own nature, Higgins complicates his own claims about change and transformation. If he can't change his nature, we have to wonder, how can he really understand how to change someone else's nature? Higgins says, if you come back, I shall treat you just as I have always treated you. I can't change my nature, and I don't intend to change my manners. My manners are exactly the same as Colonel Pickering's. That's what he believes in. Higgins acts as though he were waiting for Eliza's final act of defiance, the time. It is hard to say, however, whether his confidence is as great as he makes it seem. Higgins, of course I do. You little fool. 5 minutes ago you were like a millstone round my neck. Now you are a tower of strength, a consort battleship. You and I and Pickering will be 3 old bachelors together instead of only 2 men and a silly girl. That's what he's enticing her for. And now some questions regarding your understanding of the theme of transformation, and the examples I've given you and the dramatic references that I shared with you will surely be great help in answering this question. Higgins and Pickering tell Mrs. Higgins that Eliza is an incredibly quick learner. They even call her a genius. Who then deserves more credit for Eliza's transformation? Eliza herself, because of her potential intelligence, or Higgins for bringing it out? You have to answer it. And when you're answering it, remember that conversation that I discussed with you in the previous lecture, where after having a bunch of parties, they both the gentlemen, they enter, one is drunk and other is probably again carried away by something, and they are congratulating each other on the success that they achieved, however entirely ignoring the point of success, the originator of this success, who is Eliza. Now, why is Higgins so keen on teaching Eliza? Can we ever really understand his real motives? If so, what do you think? What are they? Now, again moving back to our theme cycle, we see there the third theme that is coming up is theme of identity. Very important theme. Every single day we talk about ourselves, saying, I did this, I did that, I am and I am not. But we don't usually think about what this I means. In Pygmalion, Shaw forces us to think this through. Some characters want to change who they are, others don't want to change at all. Things get even more complicated when identities are made up, they are changed, or they are transformed, or they are constructed. The play wants us to ask ourselves what I really means to think about different versions of the self, and whether that self can ever really be changed or not. Since we find Higgins throughout the play struggling to change Eliza's self, however, in the end he says, I can't change myself. The person who is not capable of changing his own self, how can he ever change self of anyone else? So if we look at theme of identity, we again have different directions, subcategories of it. Minor details, gender-specific attitudes, uncertainty, prejudice, and stereotypes, objective versus subjective attitude, clash within, multidimensionality, and fallacies. All right. Even the things we do to establish a connection with unfamiliar people and things, like using slang or nicknames, can end up causing confusion in cases of mistaken identity. And for that, we know that the mother, now tell me how you know that young gentleman's name. The flower girl, I didn't. The mother, I heard you call him by it. Don't try to deceive me. The flower girl, protesting. Who's trying to deceive you? I called him Freddy or Charlie, same as you might yourself if you was talking to a stranger and wish to be pleasant. She sits down beside her basket. So, it's a dialogue between Higgins' mother, Mrs. Higgins, and Eliza. And Eliza is trying to establish a fact that if you are trying to be pleasant with somebody, well, you would like to take the very common name in the society, and Charlie and Freddie can be one of those names. And however, the mother is taking it all wrong, being prejudiced that if she's calling him with these names, there might be some other reasons behind it. So mistaken identities are constructed even by using slangs or nicknames. So name makes a difference in constructing and identifying oneself. Eliza seems extremely insecure about her own identity and character. She fears that even the smallest offense will lead people to look at her and treat her differently. And what makes us think that? The flower girl, springing up terrified, I ain't done nothing wrong by speaking to the gentleman. I've a right to sell flowers if I keep off the curb. Hysterically, I'm a respectable girl, so help me. I never spoke to him except to ask him to buy a flower of me. They'll take away my character and drive me on the streets for speaking to gentlemen. And this is how she's behaving. If you can recall the first act where Eliza is told by a stranger that her notes are being taken by a stranger, and she is terrified and she's afraid of being caught up for talking to a gentleman. She thinks that it's basically that status fear that she basically brought up with, that a girl from a lower class cannot even talk to some gentleman of upper class, and that is the fear this uneducated girl keeps in, and it keeps growing, and this is how it presented its nature today when she met these people. Now, we see here that identity can be determined by something as small as a pair of boots, and you read this in Beckett's drama Waiting for Godot as well, where boots and hats are used in order to give identity to different kinds of characters. Now in this drama, the bystander, it's all right, he's a gentleman, look at his boots, explaining to the note taker, she thought you was a copper's knock, sir. So in order to confirm that he is a gentleman, and the bystander tells Eliza to take care of the gentleman's boot because they add into somebody's personality. Now, gender-specific attitude in terms of identity. Judging Eliza by her slovenly appearance, Higgins treats Eliza like an object instead of a human being. His comment is no doubt most of the time sarcastic, but it tells us something about his attitude toward women. Knowing Shaw's background, Shaw's biography that we discussed in the first lecture of this drama, now we can see the resemblance of Higgins' character with Shaw's character somehow, somewhere. Now Higgins' attitude towards women may have some reasons for Shaw's attitudes towards women. So let's see what he's trying to portray here. Higgins: Pickering, shall we ask this beggar to sit down, or shall we throw her out of the window? That's what he's talking about Eliza when she first enters his place to beg him to teach her language lessons. Now, the feeling of uncertainty, the doubt. Eliza seems to have grown up without a feminine presence in her life, and she's proud to have turned out all right anyway. Perhaps this pride is what leads her to keep claiming she's a good girl. However, she would want people to say this too. Eliza: I ain't got no mother. I ain't got no mother. That means I have a mother. Her dad turned me out. It was my sixth stepmother, but I done without them, and I'm a good girl. I am. That's her monologue that she's keeping in the beginning, in the Act 1, trying to prove herself good and trying to prove herself not a criminal. And she says that she did not commit a crime by talking to a gentleman. Stereotypes. Eliza attempts again to define herself in contrast to stereotypes. She wants to make it clear that she's not simply looking for handouts. Still, it's hard for her to look dignified in her dirty clothes. Eliza: No, I don't want no gold and no diamonds. I'm a good girl, I am. She sits down again with an attempt at dignity. So, at that time, she was not associating her appearance with dignity, and she kept her dignity no matter how dirty clothing she had at that time. Now, what were these fallacies then? Higgins stereotypes Eliza as a poor person and simply assumes that she has a drinking problem. Now, fallacies that we attach with, where we attach two thoughts together because of our own prejudice. If somebody is poor, he or she might be a drinker too. So, if Eliza's father drank, probably Eliza would drink too. So these are the fallacies, and one of these fallacies Higgins picked up as well regarding Eliza. Higgins: Oh, pay her whatever is necessary. Put it down in the housekeeping book. Impatiently: What on earth will she want this with money? She'll have her food and her clothes. She'll only drink if you give her money. Eliza, turning on him: Oh, you are a brute? It's a lie. Nobody ever saw the sign of liquor on me. She goes back to her chair and plants herself there defiantly. Now, we see that the object of experiment versus the subject of experiment. Not only has Higgins come to view his client as object rather than human beings, he even seems to have lost something of his own identity in the process too. This is another interesting interpretation. However, a block of wood, like a canvas, is a medium for artistic expression. He, of course, is paid to sharp his clients, but this suggests that he himself could also be subject to the same process. And for that, we can quote Higgins: What that thing scared? I assure you, rising to explain. You see, she'll be a pupil, and teaching would be impossible unless pupils were scared. Pupils were sacred. I've taught scores of American millionaires how to speak English. The best looking women in the world. I'm seasoned. They might as well be blocks of wood. I might as well be a block of wood. And that he himself understands that this transformation can be a two-way process, not transforming the one who is object of transformation, but it can be the same process to the transformer. Higgins admits that he sees himself as a sort of child still in the process of growing, an impression which Shaw confirms in his initial description. At the same time, he is unwilling to acknowledge certain other highly visible aspects of his personality. Higgins, you know, Pickering, that women has the most extraordinary ideas about me. Here I am, a shy, different sort of man. I've never been able to feel really grown up and tremendous like other chaps, and yet she's firmly persuaded that I'm an arbitrary, overbeating, bossing kind of person. I can't account for it. So you can see there is a clash within, a kind of conflict that is developing inside Higgins, and he's trying to find out who he is now, the one who was there before, the one who got developed during the process of transformation. Mrs. Higgins is concerned that her son and Pickering have been short-sighted and fail to acknowledge the full extent of their risk and task. Eliza's problems, like her personality, are multifaceted. You see that this is what Mrs. Higgins pointed out, where when both of these gentlemen took Eliza to her place in order to make her agree that she'll be part of her tea party. And the objection raised by the mother, this was one of those objections, that you cannot change her completely. And what will she do once she is done with this change, a partial transformation? Mrs. Higgins, be quiet, Henry. Colonel Pickering, don't you realize that when Eliza walked into Wimpole Street, something walked in with her? Pickering, what? Mrs. Higgins, unconsciously danting herself by the word. A problem, Mrs. Higgins. No, you two infinitely stupid male creatures. The problem of what is to be done with her afterwards. Higgins, I don't see anything in that. She can go her own way with all the advantages I have given her. So this I is standing all the way there with Higgins throughout this process, and that causes the major problem in the end. So the theme of identity is one of the major themes of the play. And for that sake, you should be ready for these questions, and I hope that these dramatic references will help you a lot in composing your draft for that. We watch Eliza change in a number of ways throughout Pygmalion. She learns how to speak properly, she begins dressing differently, etc. But does she ever lose her old self, her old identity? Can we really say what her old identity is anyway? Can you define that? Then, on the other hand, can we ever really be sure that identity is fixed or they cannot be changed? Does Eliza's transformation call into question the way we view the self? Are there any characters who seem totally and completely comfortable with themselves and their personalities? Or everybody's looking for change? What do you think? And then, what are the different ways in which the characters define themselves? For instance, do they compare themselves to other groups? Do they allow their class to define them? Or their jobs? Are they even conscious of their own identities? And the last one is, why the heck is Eliza so afraid that people will think she's not a good girl? So this makes us finish with the theme of identity, and we can start with our next theme, that is theme of appearance. Is beauty only skin deep? Is it in the eyes of the beholder? Or is it the consequence of social circumstances? Shaw's more interested in dealing with the big questions like that last one than with old saws. In Pygmalion, anything from a pair of boots to a bath to an expensive dress can tell us important stuff about a character, like their place in the world or their state of mind. They can reveal what might normally be hidden from view or hide that which might normally be obvious. So, appearances can be deceptive, deceiving, and the trick is learning how to judge what is true and what is false. The thing is, it's not an easy skill to pick up. So let's see how many different directions we have in this theme of appearance. We have physical appeal, standards of appearance, behavior, deceptive attribute of personality, language versus visual skills, awareness, genteel poverty, subject to change, subjectivity, transformative aspect of appearance, conflict, and acknowledgement. Shaw tells us that she's not at all an attractive person. Here we talk about Eliza, but he contradicts himself in the next act. In this case, mere physical appearance, dirtiness, and neglect destroy any kind of physical appeal. That is what he's establishing. Eliza is not at all an attractive person. She's perhaps 18, perhaps 20, hardly older. She wears a little sailor hat of black straw that has long been exposed to the dust and soot of London and has seldom if ever been brushed. Her hair needs washing rather badly. Its mousy color can hardly be natural. She wears a shoddy black coat that reaches nearly to her knees and its shape to her waist. She has a brown skirt with a coarse apron. Her boots are much the worse for wear. She's no doubt as clean as she can afford to be, but compared to the ladies, she's very dirty. Her features are no worse than theirs, but their condition leaves something to be desired, and she needs the service of a dentist. That's what he believes about Eliza when he first met her. Even before she starts to speak and talk correctly, Eliza has some ideas about cleanliness, self-image, and respectability. She is simply unable to meet any of the usual standards by these people, by the elite class pretended to be elite here in this play. The flower girl enters in state. She has a hat with 3 ostrich feathers, orange, sky blue, and red. She has a nearly clean apron, and the shoddy coat has been tidied a little. The pathos of this deplorable figure, with its innocent vanity and consequential air, touches Pickering, who has already straightened himself in the presence of Mrs. Pierce. Mrs. Pierce has strong views on the potential harmfulness of what might be called bad behavior. As she sees it, Higgins must look and act respectable if he expects Eliza to change for the better. Mrs. Pierce, yes, sir. Then might I ask you not to come down to breakfast in your dressing gown, or at any rate not to use it as a napkin to the extent you do, sir. And if you would be so good as not to eat everything off the same plate, and to remember not to put the porridge saucepan out of your hand on the clean tablecloth. It would be a better example to the girl. You know, you nearly choked yourself with a fish bone in the jam only last week. So that is, she's being very clear about the reality of Higgins and what he pretends to be, in comparison with the kind of behavior she's keeping up with that poor soul, Eliza, just for the reason for her crime to be poor. Doolittle's clothing clashes with his other attributes. His facial features, his demeanor, his voice. He is dressed like a dustman, but Shaw tells us that he's not the kind of person we might expect. Alfred Doolittle is an elderly but vigorous dustman, clad in the costume of his profession, including a hat with a black brim covering his neck and shoulders. He has well-marked and rather interesting features, and seems equally free from fear and conscious. He has a remarkably expressive voice, the result of a habit of giving vent to his feelings without reserve. His present pose is that of wounded honor and stern resolution. So that is the deceptive attribute of Alfred Doolittle, that he caches very well towards the end. Now language, the skill of language versus the skill of seeing, or the act of saying versus act of showing. Just as with the upstarts, Higgins mentions all it takes is a single word to disrupt an extremely powerful illusion. He's talking about power of images and power of words in contrast here. Like they say, a word is of thousand picture. Well, Doolittle hurries to the door, anxious to get away with his booty. When he opens it, he is confronted with a dainty and exquisitely clean young Japanese lady in a simple blue cotton kimono printed cunningly with small wild jasmine blossoms. Mrs. Pierce is with her. He gets out of her way deferentially and apologizes. "Beg pardon, miss." The Japanese lady, "Gone, don't you know your own daughter?" So how these words reveal personalities and how these appearances disguise personalities. That is the point that Higgins wants to make here, and that basically Shaw wants to make here. Then Mrs. Higgins' graceful beauty and her ability to define herself against fashion suggest that she is very comfortable with herself, whatever she is, that she knows deep down who she is. Instead of pretending and pretended figures like others, she is the kind of person who would like to share what she really is. There is a portrait of Mrs. Higgins as she was when she defied fashion in her youth in one of the beautiful Rosatian costumes, which, when caricatured by people who did not understand, led to the absurdities of popular aestheticism in the 1870s. In the corner, diagonally opposite the door, Mrs. Higgins, now over 60 and long past taking the trouble to dress out of the fashion, sits writing at an elegantly simple writing table with a bell button within reach of her hand. It defines the presence of Mrs. Higgins and tells us how well she is aware of her personality, and she does not bother to take things over where they are not required, just for the reason that people would expect it. Now, what do we mean by genteel poverty? Though Mrs. and Miss Ansford Hill are both subject to the same kind of genteel poverty, each expresses their condition in a different way, perhaps because of the difference in age. And Mrs. and Miss Ansford Hill are the mother and daughter who sheltered from the rain in Covent Garden. The mother is well bred, quiet, and has the habitual anxiety of straitened means. The daughter has acquired a gay air of being very much at home in society, the bravado of genteel poverty, and we are going to have a detailed discussion on this topic that relates to middle class morality as well. And then Eliza, first described as not at all attractive, has become incredibly desirable thanks to some nice clothing, jewelry, and a few months of speech lessons. Appearance is a changeable and powerful thing. That is a very powerful statement made very clear by the writer. Eliza, who is exquisitely dressed, produces an impression of such remarkable distinction and beauty as she enters that they all rise, quite flustered. Guided by Higgins' signals, she comes to Mrs. Higgins with studied grace. So see how the personality is subject to change only by adding minor details to it. The contrast between Eliza's clothing and her face, between their elegance and her sadness, recalls the disconnect between Eliza's magnificent skills and her opportunities to employ them. Eliza opens the door and is seen on the lighted landing in opera clock. brilliant evening dress and diamonds with fan, flowers and all accessories. She comes to the hearth and switches on the electric lights there. She's tired. Her pallor contrasts strongly with her dark eyes and hair. Her expression is almost tragic. So it's a conflict that even appearance cannot deceive. Now, acknowledgement. After spending so much time learning to express herself correctly with words, it seems ironic that her first triumph is signaled with nothing more than expressions. And even those expressions are not for Eliza separately. Eliza smiles for the first time, expresses her feeling by a wild pantomime in which an imitation of Higgins' exit is confused with her own triumph, and finally goes down on her knees on the hearthrug to look for the ring. And we are going to inshallah very soon watch this particular scene on the screen, so you can really have the feeling of it. So this was all about the theme of appearance, and we have again some questions that we need to discuss, and you probably need to take your notes down when we have discussed this theme in detail. Probably you have enough material to compose your answer for it. At the end of Act 4, Eliza tells Higgins that she doesn't want the clothing and jewelry that was given to her. Why does this anger Higgins so much that he loses his temper first time in his life? And Higgins tells Pickering that he can pass off Eliza as a duchess in 6 months' time. What does this phrase really mean? What does it say about his intentions? Then, Shaw uses clothing to tell us about characters throughout the play. Eliza manages to trick people by wearing more expensive, fashionable clothes. What does this tell us about the power of appearance? Could Pygmalion still work as a play if Eliza were not attractive, not beautiful? Could she win that victory that she had in the end, or probably towards the end? So, the next theme is theme of manipulation. In Pygmalion, we see different types of influences and control, sometimes literal and other times metaphorical. The teacher training his student, the artist shaping his creation, the con artist fleecing his mark, the child playing with his toy. That said, these roles aren't always well defined. They can change easily without warning. Sometimes the master becomes the slave and the slave the master in the blink of the eye, while other times the two simply become equals. Shaw wants us to observe the consequence of control to see how these changes occur and how the theme of manipulation works in the play. So let's see, what do we have to understand here in theme of manipulation? There are again different directions. We will discuss theme of manipulation in relation with ambitiousness, entertainment, behavior, control, rhetoric, uncompassionate feeling, इसको काटेगा, uncompassionate feelings, excitement, fear, reversibility, transformation. So, what do we understand by this uncompassionate feeling? Higgins' motives for helping Eliza do not seem to spring from compassion. If you remember, in the very first meeting, when Eliza comes to see Higgins, Higgins only gets ready to see her for the sake that he'll be able to have some more material regarding the kind of language he speaks. So that the deal of even meeting her was not for the sake of compassion. And when he gives her a tip of $100 there in Act 1 in the market area, that is to shut her up literally, not to make her continue with the kind of nonsense talk she's doing, because that was kind of hard on Higgins' ears. But the skills he agrees to teach her are certainly intended to help her prosper. And that's what she says to Mrs. Higgins too, when Mrs. Higgins is pointing out that what will she do once she is a transformed girl? She will not have anything to do later on. Higgins very easily says that she will have all the advantages associated with advanced skill of speech. So she can do anything with that. So we understand that although her intentions are not compassionate, but in any way they are to benefit Eliza, no matter that the prime reason is of probably for him to define himself, to probably to win this bet with Colonel Pickering. However, he understands that during this process the Eliza as a character will get benefited too. However, how compassionate was he towards her, we need to understand that. Pickering: Higgins, I'm entrusted. What about the ambassador's garden party? I'll say you're the greatest teacher alive if you make that good. I'll bet you all the expenses of the experiment you can't do it. And I'll pay for the lessons. Eliza: oh, you are really good. Thank you, Captain. Higgins, tempted, looking at her. It's almost irresistible. She's so deliciously low, so horribly dirty. Liza: and she's making those sounds. I am dirty. I washed my face and hands afore I come, I did. So, you see, Pickering's attitude, he's willing to invest money. Higgins' attitude, and Eliza's self. Then we have this element of excitement. Higgins is so quickly wrapped up, pun not intended, in his project, that he immediately starts to treat her as an object, raw material for his designs to carve in. And how does he show this? Higgins storming on: take all her clothes off and burn them, ring up Whiteley or somebody for new ones, wrap her up in brown paper till they come. So this is her deal with Eliza, the way he is treating her. The aspect of fear attached with this theme of manipulation. Higgins takes a strange pleasure in tempting Eliza, as if he is scared she will run away. It seems as though he may be attached to her long before he pleads for her to stay at Wimpole Street. And how do we know that? Higgins: listen, Eliza, I think you said you came in a taxi. Eliza: well, what if I did? I've as good a right to take a taxi as anyone else. Higgins: you have, Eliza, and in future you shall have as many taxis as you want. You shall go up and down and round the town in a taxi every day. Think of that. So here, think of that, Eliza. Here, Higgins seems attracting Eliza, treating Eliza, giving her, showing her the glitter and glimmer of the society where she is already ready to stay. Why would that be? What kind of fear Higgins is facing deep down? The aspect of control. We already learned about the control of manner and control of emotion in the other themes we were discussing, the theme of identity and theme of language and communication. On the other hand, Mrs. Pierce suggests that under certain circumstances, Higgins' manipulation is inadvertent, and that he is even capable of losing control of manipulating himself. Why would they say? Mrs. Pierce, she patiently says, I think you would better let me speak to the girl properly in private. I don't know what I can take charge of her or consent to the arrangement at all. Of course, I know you don't mean her any harm, but when you get what you call interested in people's accent, you never think or care what may happen to them or you. Come with me, Eliza. So Mrs. Pierce knows that she needs to take control because she understands that Higgins he does not only manipulate people, he even manipulate herself for the desire he keeps that is in direct relation with his profession and his skills, and when a time comes he can't even spare himself. Now, power of rhetoric. We know one figure in the play, Alfred Doolittle, who is known for his rhetorical speech, God-gifted skill. Higgins, himself an expert in language, acknowledges the sometimes dangerous power of language and rhetoric, and he is very much of the same opinion regarding Alfred Doolittle too. Higgins, after listening to Doolittle, Pickering, if we listen to this man another minute, we shall have no convictions left. He has such convincing power that we cannot say no to him anymore. So let him have what he wants to. And here he accepts the power of rhetoric in a person who has no education at all, considering is a gift of God. Ambitiousness. Mrs. Higgins, like Mrs. Pierce, seems to agree that Higgins can get carried where his art is concerned, that we already have discussed under the theme of manipulation, and that was control, theme of control. Higgins can get carried away where his art is concerned. He seems unable to acknowledge how artificial Eliza's behavior is. You remember the very first tea party where Eliza is invited, forcefully invited by Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins finds her so robotic and so artificial in her behavior, and she's unable to understand what kind of pleasure both of these guys are taking in making Eliza behave like this. Mrs. Higgins, you silly boy, of course she's not presentable. She's a triumph of your art and of her dressmakers. But if you suppose for a moment that she doesn't give herself away in every sentence she utters, she must be perfectly correct about her. And that's what she does when she starts talking about her aunt. So we find Mrs. Higgins' character a kind of very who has this far-sightedness, who can logically analyze things. Whatsoever she says during this play, whatsoever predictions she states regarding Eliza, all of them prove true in the end. The element of entertainment, although the whole entire play is a kind of entertainment, however, often Higgins and Pickering do not seem to treat her like a human being, and her remarkable abilities are simply a source of entertainment for them. So for a moment, when we think about when Higgins says that he cannot do without Eliza now, probably he is considering her only a source of entertainment for her, and it's a kind of personal source of entertainment because he has personalized her by transforming her from one kind of person to another kind of person. So he finds it more comfortable being with her than being with any other person. Higgins to Pickering as they go out together. Let's take her to the Shakespeare exhibition at Earl's Court. Pickering, yes, her remarks will be delicious. Higgins, she'll mimic all the people for us when we get home. So they are enjoying Eliza's skill, ignoring the fact that whatever she does, it's her real, genuine self, and she does not do such things in order to please these people. So what kind of behavior is formed when we think about this theme of manipulation? Trick indeed. Higgins and Pickering talk about Eliza if she were a pet, a performing animal. Higgins keeps on talking about her as throw her off like an object of disgust. Pickering, stretching himself, well, I feel a bit tired. It's been a long day. The garden party, a dinner party, and the opera. Rather too much of a good thing. But you have won your bet. Higgins, Eliza did the trick. And something to spare, eh? So what she did was a trick. Trick designed, prepared, and presented by these two jugglers, these two transformers. And Eliza does not exist anywhere as a human being, as the one who really performed the act. And reversibility, a very important aspect of theme of manipulation. Eliza is not, of course, literally enslaved, and Higgins has no intention of chaining her up as well. Her training, however, makes her unable to go back to her old ways, to her old life, to her old community. She is no longer being manipulated actively. Rather, the effects of the manipulation are unshakable. Now, if she would want to go back to her old ways, she is unable to do that. Lisa, oh, if I only could go back to my flower basket, if I only could. I shouldn't be independent of both you and father and all the world. Why did you take my independence from me? Why did I give it up? I'm a slave now for all my fine clothes and for all my appearance. So, do we have this appearance as an element of enslavement for characters in the play? That is one question I want you to think about. And then the act of transformation under the theme of manipulation. By the end, Eliza seems to have learned a thing or two about manipulation too, and control from her teacher. Still, when she turns the table, he tries to turn them right back because he is the one who teaches. So, Lisa, now I know how to deal with you. What a fool I was not to think of it before. You can't take away the knowledge you gave me. You said I had a finer ear than you, and I can be civil and kind to people, which is more than you can. That's done you, Henry Higgins, it has. Now I don't care that, snapping her fingers, for your bullying and your big talk. I'll advertise it in the papers that your Duchess is only a flower girl that you taught, and that she'll teach anybody to be a Duchess just the same in 6 months for 1,000 guineas. Oh, when I think of myself crawling under your feet and being trampled on and called names, when all the time I had only to lift up my fingers to be as good as you, I could just kick myself. It's the last climactic talk between Lisa and Professor Henry Higgins, where now she's trying to take control and turning the table back onto Professor Higgins and letting him understand that I can manipulate you and return to your manipulation too. And this was the last thing that we had to discuss about the theme of manipulation. So we have some questions. I have some questions for you to think about and compose your answers in your response. Toward the end of the play, Eliza tells Higgins that she has become a slave. Is she right? Does that make him a slave driver? Does that make her a slave? Throughout Pygmalion, Eliza is repeatedly objectified, compared to everything from a pebble to a piece of trash. Is there any reason why Shaw compares her to the things he does? Is there a better way to describe the way she is treated? The mythical Pygmalion was a sculptor who fashioned his ideal women out of stone. Shaw is clearly making a comparison between Pygmalion and Higgins, But does that comparison really hold up? Now, when you know the story, you understood it so perfectly, and knowing the theme of Pygmalion in detail, are you able to draw this comparison between both of these versions? Higgins is most certainly the manipulator-in-chief in Pygmalion. But what about the other characters? Do any of them exert their own influence on Eliza? Does she do anything manipulating herself? So that is all what we did today in our lecture 23rd, where we continued our discussion about the themes in Pygmalion. We discussed the theme of transformation, theme of identity, theme of appearance, and theme of manipulation. And still there are a few more themes we have to go with, and that will be part of your next lecture, inshallah. That was all for today. I will see you in the next lecture. By then, Allah Hafiz.